I'm delighted to welcome Natasha, author of this wonderful is billed as a disturbing portrait of a modern American family. Natasha, would you like to just say a little bit about Love Orange and sort of what drew you to write it?
Yes, so I often forget to say this, but I'm half American, half English, and I've lived in England now for many years recently. But that goes a certain way of explaining when people think like, why did you write an American novel? It makes no sense. But I did grow up in America, and so America has tremendous amounts of familiarity to me. Anyway, the book is about a family, so it's about a family of 4, and each character gets a chance to tell the story in quite short chapters. So they sort of pass the baton between them of the plot. And they live in a smart house. So they live in a house that's really high tech. And the house sort of is an extra character as well. And a very sort of high tech context for their lives. So I suppose as the reviews have said, this book has a lot of issues in it. So there's a lot going on. Every character has trouble and problems. And most of the problems are about questions of identity. So a lot of them are struggling with who they are and how they fit in, right? So how they fit in society at large, how they fit into the family structure, and who they consider themselves to be. And there's this sort of theme, which is of I suppose that everybody is a sort of prisoner in their own life, in a way.
So Hank, so the 4 characters in the story are Hank, who is the dad, Jenny, who is the mum, and then the 2 children, Jesse and Luke. Luke has a special place in my heart because he was lovely, and I think so Hank, there's a lot to say about Hank, isn't there? So because he is a very interesting character. I mean, they're all very interesting characters, but I think Hank for me was the one that I love to hate because he evokes so many emotions in me because he can be just, I don't know. I called him a spanner last night on the
oh, that's right, on Twitter.
On Twitter,
there was this great Twitter buddy read. That's right.
So would you? So how did you come up with Hank, and what was your sort of reasoning behind his character, because he is something else, isn't he, really?
He really is. I mean, unfortunately, in fact, I think in a previous NISA, so he's a super conflicted person, right? So he's really wondering where to place himself. I think he must have grown up as a sort of handsome, jock, sporty guy.
Yeah.
And then as an adult, he's not that successful. He complains about all these things the patriarchy are blamed for, and he's not sure if he's really part of the patriarchy after all. And I mean, it's not to say that I meant to mock him, but I meant really actually to say that, like, this is the kind of thing that could make a person quite angry. They get brought up in one way, and then as an adult they find that that's completely an expired first way of being, and they have to find a new way of being. Although the construct is still there. I mean, they're in a nuclear family. Nothing has much changed, except that I think he's wondering what to do about, he's probably having a midlife crisis,
awful, aren't they, as well? I mean, when they came, somebody called them the beige family.
Oh, that's right. They were wearing beige driving jackets or something.
I think they made me want to. I can imagine, like, poor Jenny. So poor Jenny is the wife, and she's sort of she's really conflicted as well, isn't she? They're all conflicted, but she is really not happy with her lot, is she? She's right.
I mean, when you think about it, between the parents-in-law, her husband, her own family, who only get a short mention, but still, she doesn't really seem to have anybody that sees her.
No.
In fact, she's sort of a collection of
which
roles.
is why I think,
to
is
others.
that why you think why she starts this so she starts this letter writing, doesn't she,
Right.
with a prisoner, John, which
Right.
is, I didn't,
and this is the
really,
big story of the book, is her correspondence with him, and how that goes, because he's in a real prison and she's in a metaphor of a prison. At least she doesn't see it that way, but she sort of sees it that way. She pretty much is realizing that that's how she feels. I mean, she's not, she's not a very strong character. And I mean, I think that's also a little bit difficult, because people like to read about strong women, who are forging ahead or doing something different. I felt in her case, actually, this was really just an exploration of agency. How much of an agent was she in her life?
Yeah.
And how could we see her, and how could, by doing the book from these 4 points of view, I could get a different view on her, or on all of them, from each other's perspective. So there's this sort of prismatic effect. But certainly in terms of what roles one play, that was a really big deal for me.
And she's
like, which role to play.
Sorry, she's very honest, isn't it? I mean, really, when she's writing the letters, you're thinking, oh, this is going to end badly.
Yes.
But
I guess the letters are the one space in which she sort of has a place to say whatever, because who's this prisoner? I mean, she doesn't really know anything about him, and she sort of imagines who he is, but really she has no idea who he is.
She has
and actually, funny enough, as the readers, we get to know who he is, as the reader does, but she never really does. No. In fact, she spends most of the book thinking that, anyway, I don't want to ruin it's so easy to say, to ruin, not ruin things, but if you tell the whole story, better not to. Anyway.
No, I think I really enjoyed it as a book, because I had no idea where it was going. I sort of, you can guess, but actually who it was going, I think they'd be telling fibs if they said that, because I just don't think.
Yeah. And it's probably a reflection of the fact that that's how I wrote it. I didn't really know where it was going either. In fact, I have a feeling that when my editor bought it, he said, you need to add an ending. I think there was I had to add an extra chapter, because he was like, you haven't ended it. So I mean, I was very much just following the pattern, so I have these 4 characters, and at the end of each chapter I think to myself, well, let's see, who do I want to hear from next? Who am I interested in? Who now? Do I go to the dad? Do I go to the son? Who do I need to check in with? And so I very much was trying to keep a reading experience in mind of okay, so you've not visited Luke for a minute, so let's go back to Luke. Luke is the sort of beautiful, spiritual, wise child, right?
He gets a really hard time from Hank, doesn't he? Because he is very wise, and he's different, isn't he? So without giving away.
Yeah, he's different. And also I mean, with him, I guess I was also really interested in showing how people sort of pathologize children, and when they're a little bit different, something's got to be wrong with them. And actually, in fact, he's obviously in some ways the most the wisest of all of them, even though he's sort of notionally the most
I really liked the way that was the thing, but looking at that sort of, you said about the portrait of an American family, it was a real sort of dissection of each person, and even with the sort of outer characters of John and Shona, they were just both really, I think the characterization of them was great. That's what I really loved about this novel, was the depth of the characters, and how,
I mean, there's definitely a character-driven novel. I mean, that has been said again and again. You're totally right. Yeah. I'm super fond of the characters of John and Shona. They don't really get a proper look in until the end, but I am so I'm just very, I don't know, I'm just deeply fond of them as characters. I don't know why. I guess also because I didn't visit them for very long, so somehow there's a purity to them. Maybe
I think when you meet Shona to start with, you're really unsure of what she's going to be like, and actually I don't want to give it away, but she isn't what you think she's going to be, or she wasn't what I thought she was going to be. I thought she would, and she would be possibly the complete opposite of what she turns out to be, without giving away
exactly
too much.
exactly. I think I did that on purpose. I'm pretty sure I know I did that on purpose, because I think I wanted to highlight that Jenny was probably misinterpreting who they were, that they, and of course it's a secret, so none of the family knows that Jenny's corresponding with this prisoner. So in fact, all that happens around the prisoner and that correspondence, which then turns into a bit of a caper, nobody knows about it except for the local priest, who happens to get wind of things through a technical glitch, maybe, nearly.
And that's quite an interesting twist, isn't it? The God phone, and him.
Yes, so as a sort of mirror to the smart home that they live in, their local church is trialing this technology of you text your confession. So instead of that, and they're not Catholics, actually, they're in America, I guess they'd be called Episcopalians. It's a bit like Church of England, but you don't go to confession as in go into a box, but you're supposed to confess before whatever part of the service it is. I can't remember, but anyway, so they text in there, and they text that that moment where everyone says peace for me. Anyway, so that's a sort of like high-tech church that the minister's trying to sort of make it bring it into the 21st century.
So going back to the smart house, because so the book is set around this smart house, and poor Jenny, at times she becomes totally, I think I would be. So was the smart house sort of I was thinking about Alexa, and so were you sort of inspired by Alexa, or even more sort of intrusive technology?
I know. Well, when I wrote the book in 2017, really, is when I started it, was that moment when Alexa was laughing in people's houses, and there were these glitches that suddenly there'd be like a burp coming out of her, or some kind of, apparently, I never witnessed it, but there was these cackle, evil laughter, and it was a glitch. Some employee at Amazon or something, had apparently placed this function in, or whatever. Anyway, they cleared it up, it was all over, but it really it was so it really hit me, and I was so interested. I don't have an Alexa.
I do. I fall
why
out
don't
with
I
mine
have
quite
Alexa?
easily. They are a bit odd.
Do you use it? When does she answer you and everything?
I don't really ask her many questions, because quite often she doesn't give me the answer, or I don't say it in the way that she wants me to say it, so I don't get the answer that I want.
Exactly.
So I think,
well, that was Jenny's thing. She was like, I have to now I have to learn someone else's protocol just to do the same things I was doing. I have to learn exactly the right way to say turn on the lights.
Yeah.
And actually it could just stand up and turn on the lights, it's just so for Jenny, and well, we only really see it with Jenny in the book. We see it with the children a little bit, but her interactions with the house are very much sort of, you're supposed to be lightening the domestic load, but you're in fact sort of confounding it.
It does, and it's his baby, isn't it, Hank? So going back to Hank, was he inspired by anybody? Did you sort of, when you were writing him, did you have someone in mind who he was, or was he just sort of?
I just think I probably met quite a lot of Hanks. He's not an unfamiliar type for me anyway. And I've encountered many versions. I suppose what I may not have done, which concerned me a lot, was try to get at the deeper, what was deeper about his struggle, because his struggle is not invalid. It's just that the way he expresses himself is through anger, really. So he turns out seeming like a bit of an unpleasant character, but the truth is he's in as much of a predicament as anybody. I don't know. I guess I was thinking about it because, look, I wrote the book actually because it began from a fragment that I wrote 15 years ago. Wow. I wrote a little fragment. Yeah. I wrote a little fragment. I thought it was going to be a short story about a family sitting around the table. and sipping this water and talking about mathematics, which is one of the first scenes in the book.
Yeah.
And I sat down to write the novel, and I thought, oh wait, what was that story fragment? I don't, it just came back to me, and I sat, and there they all were, Hank and Jenny and Jessie and Luke. They were there already, and they were so alive. And this is only a page or two of writing. That I was like, well, let me just see where these people go. So that was their genesis, really, was I mean, I don't know, 15 years ago, I wrote a bit of a thing about a family sitting around a table, which was to do with technology.
Yeah.
It was a sort of Ray Bradbury, George Saunders, that sort of feeling of thing. And then I wrote the novel out of that kitchen. That kitchen table was just the beginning. That's where I wrote the novel from.
And that's, you know, I think for Hank, I think he is a very conflicted and sort of, you know, complicated figure, isn't he? So he wants his children to be, he's been brought up in a way, and he hasn't learned from that, but so he wants his children to sort of fit into this sort of, you know, ideal, what he thinks a boy should be. I think that's, you know, that was the bit that really made me cross, I think with him.
Well, I mean, I actually think that a lot of fathers struggle with that, because they sort of want to do for their kids what was done for them.
Yeah.
And yet then they start getting confused, because it all seems to sort of go wrong.
Yeah.
You know, children are different, and children will continue to be different, and teenagers are certainly different than they used to be. From sort of generation to generation now, it seems.
Well, particularly with the technology, isn't it? And I think you were saying about the technology, and, you know, Jessie particularly in this novel, the oldest child, is involved in all sorts, isn't he?
He really is. I mean, he's got his Minecraft or whatever it is he's playing, his like shooting game, which does that thing to him, which it does to so many children. Fortnite, I guess it's normally, which it makes people say it makes their children super aggressive after this, because of that addictive quality, that when you take it away, there's a sort of there's a rage effect.
He does,
and
doesn't
so
he? He definitely has his rages. Did you sorry, I lost my plot there a bit. So for people who haven't read the book, it follows the story of, like we said, about the so Jenny is writing to John, who is in prison, and we don't know what he's in prison for, but they have quite a sort of interesting relationship, don't they? Jenny is very honest and open with him, and then there's John's wife, Shona, and she comes into the story later on,
right?
And it's really difficult, because it's one of these books, if you just say the wrong thing, you're going to give away like such a big part of it. But it's,
I know, and I keep thinking, like, do other books do this? Is it so? Because I found it so difficult talking about this book, because it's not a thriller, it's not a psychological suspense, it's not one of those books that you don't want to give away the twist in the plot.
No. And
yet you don't want to give away the things. I just don't want to give away the things, because I mean, the back cover says quite a lot as it is, I thought.
I mean, I've got the sort of, because I did, like we said, I did the buddy read, which was really sort of good at sort of analysing, and it does, because I think the back cover does say, so I'll read a little bit of the back cover, because I've got it here just in case for people who haven't read it. So so it says, letter by letter, John pinches Jenny awake from the marshmallow numbness of her life. In their exchanges, she expresses tenderness and unexpected affection. Constantly under surveillance, their letters chart a secret rebellion, a bid for freedom. But Jenny is coming curiously dependent on the sweet orange glue that seals John's envelopes, and their lives begin to converge with toxic consequences. So, I mean, it does give a little bit away there. And
I will say that there's nothing made up. I mean, everything that seems outrageous in this book is in fact based totally on fact. I mean, really, oh no, except for the God phone, which I did make up. I did make up the church technology.
Yeah.
But all the rest of it is, you know, is Googleable, researchable stuff about prison and drugs and effects of drugs and effects of certain procedures, and it's all true.
Yeah,
it's all true.
I think that's why the book is so likable in my opinion, because it is all real. It's not, you know, it's not sort of so out there that you think, oh, that's ridiculous, that could never happen. It's all really believable, and I think that's I think that what for me made it even more sort of engrossing, really. I just really wanted to, and actually I was only reading sort of about 6 or 7 chapters. That the last week was the hardest not to go on to read the end. I've got a question actually from Mia. So Mia says, orange pops up several times besides the glue. Can you tell us about the origin of the title?
Oh, so orange does pop up a lot, it's true. And so the title came after the fact. In fact, I'd given it the working title of the Tinkleys. In fact, the Tinkleys was just a working surname. I didn't even really, I was just like, oh, what should I call them? I'll call them the Tinkleys. And I'll probably change it later. And I never changed it. And then when I went out in submission with it, I didn't really have a title, so I just called it the Tinkleys, because someone said, look, just call it what it's about. It's about a family. Just call it the name of the family. Okay, I'll do that. So when it went to my agent, it was called the Tinkleys. When she took it out on submission, it was called the Tinkleys. Then it went into editing, which was not a very in-depth process. I just had to add some things in. And then I had a coffee with my editor, and he was like, the Tinkleys, I'm not sure. Can we think of some other things? And we both were like, flipping through the book, because there is a moment in the book where it talks about the color orange representing love. At the end, towards the end, between Shona and Jenny are having a conversation, and they talk about the color orange representing love in the context of what they're talking about. Anyway, and then of course Hank mentions oranges, Luke mentions oranges at the beginning. I mean, that was not actually very planned at all.
No.
But we both thought, what about, at first we thought orange love, and then somehow, funnily enough, in our correspondence, me and the editor, it just switched to love orange. One day it just split, and then neither of us changed it. Yeah,
and love orange.
So I mean, I don't know what the orange thing was. It was actually more to do just with the glue, I suppose, fundamentally. Yeah. But Mia is right. It really does. It really comes up more often. I mean, it comes up. There's even a fly, one of those sticky fly strips, which is orange.
Yeah. You must have had a sort of subconscious thing about orange when you were writing it. So did you?
Well, yeah, because and then I think about myself. Like, was I subconsciously thinking of like orange is the new black with the prison thing, and I was like, maybe. What was going on?
It's a really striking.
I think
cover.
a lot of this is really unconscious. A lot of the connections.
Yeah, I think it's like the cover is, for anybody who hasn't seen it, is so simple but so striking. I think. I
know.
I do.
So mine is slightly oranger than yours. Mine is backwards.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's
Mine's
very.
Yeah.
It's very. To me, this looks like the cover of a sort of 70s feminist tract, right? It sort of has that 70s vibe about it. I mean, I was happy that was the first cover they showed me, and I was like, oh, okay. I mean, it's so simple.
I think it's just the contrast, isn't it? The black and the white and the.
Well, yeah, but also there's the envelope.
Do you know, I'd never. See, look, I haven't.
Love orange is falling out of the envelope.
Yeah. Oh, yes.
And is like the plot is right there on the cover, right? It's falling out.
We had the video that you sent me for the thing, and that's doing it, isn't
exactly.
it?
Yeah, that's right.
It's late.
The book designer is someone called John Gray, and he does a lot of kind of interesting retro, very graphically strong covers. I think he's a bit of a genius.
So what makes your background is a literary translator. So had it always been your sort of plan to write 15 years ago? Had it been something that you wanted to do but sort of never happened, or?
Yes. I mean, I'd sort of done bits and pieces of fiction all my life, really, but then got very much not sidetracked. I really just developed a passion for translating, and then did a lot of it. And then after it's extremely hard work, translation, extremely hard work. And I just, every time I sort of thought I'd write a book of my own, another translation project would come my way, and I'd think, oh, that's fascinating, I'll do that. So I and then there came a moment where I thought, actually a friend of mine died, and when she died, I thought, oh, you better just do what you need. Like, if you want to write a book, you better get on and do it. You know, you just, like, sometimes you just need to have a bit of a wake up and think, you better do what you think you want to do. So I thought, you know, I'll just have a real go at it this time. This time I'm just going to really try and just go start it and push on through. See what happens, see what comes out of it all. And I'm really glad I did, because in the process of sort of pushing through whatever the many barriers that were there for me, many psychological barriers and barriers of I had a big barrier in that I was wondering if I had anything to say. It was just a massive stumbling block for me. I didn't know what I had to say, and of course as a translator you're not responsible for what's being said, really. So you're letting someone else have the story, have the moral, have the impetus, right, as a translator, and you're ushering that through. And I was really unsure if I had anything to say. And then once I got started, as you can well see, I obviously had plenty to say, because I really had plenty to say. I mean, it turns out that I had more to say than the book is a little bit stuffed with things that I've.
Do you think you'll write? Will you write another? Have you got anything planned?
Yeah. No, I'm trying to write another now. Actually, I have two different things slightly happening. And funny enough, last night there was all these people on Twitter saying, sequel, you've got to write again these characters, you've got to carry them on. And I have thought of that. I've considered that.
Yeah, a couple of of my friends sort of said to me, had you planned a sequel? They'd like to sort of see sort of Hank and Jenny in 10 years' time and see what happens to all of them.
I know. I mean, actually, I don't really know what happens to them. The only thing I can imagine is maybe what happens to the children, like how they might become adults. But how Hank and Jenny age or overcome any of the issues that I gave them, yeah, I don't know. It's complicated. Plus, it's set in 2015, so if I have to do a sequel, I'd have to set it in the future, really.
Yeah,
right? I'd have to somehow imagine a post-Trump world, and I mean, you know, I set it in 2015 particularly to avoid it being set in the time of Trump.
That's it. Emily's asked a question: have you translated Love Orange?
No, I haven't. And actually, that's a very good question. But I don't translate into any other language except for English. So I translate from other languages to English, and that tends to be the right way around when you're doing literary translation, because in literary translation, what is extremely important is your command of your language, right? How well you are able to find solutions to the tricks you find or the trickinesses you find in the foreign language. So I wouldn't dare, actually. I mean, I don't think I would. In fact, I guess I could try, but I think I'd make probably a mess of it. I'd prefer to leave it to somebody else. And we'll see, it might get translated actually to some other languages. So.
Yeah, quite often books do, don't they? They do. Yeah. Do you, what languages do you speak to translate? So Russian, I saw that you do.
So Russian is the language I most translate, and French. I speak French. I mean, I have a good command of French, and then my husband is Georgian, so from Tbilisi, and so I've spent a lot of time in Georgia as well. So I have some Georgian, and I've done a bit of translating from Georgian. Not much.
Yeah. So that's. I mean, Russian is not an easy language in itself, is it? So.
It is not. It is not. And Georgian is much worse. Georgian is an extremely difficult language. I mean, really, it's beyond It has no relation to any other language on the entire
Really?
planet,
Wow.
basically. Yeah.
Fascinating.
So it's not related to Russian or Turkish. None of it. It's people try to equate it with Basque or Etruscan, but that's only them grasping at straws. There's really no relation. It has no relation. But whereas Russian, actually, once you get the structure in your head, once you get the mechanism, it's an incredibly dynamic language. I mean, it's just incredibly muscular. It's wonderful.
I think it's the different alphabet and all the, I suppose,
Yes.
fascinating. So, but do you, so that's your sort of, has that become, that was your sort of day job? Has this, being a novelist, is that
I mean, the thing is
over a bit, or are you going to
gosh, I hope so. If I can get on with it a little bit. I mean, the pandemic set me back a little bit because I just didn't have enough. I didn't get as much work done this year as I really unencumbered space.
No.
So I've sort of, I'm not sure where I am. I probably will take a translation on, but I'd like to get going with I'd like to get these novels that they have half started. I'd like to get them on the go. I mean, translation, I still do quite a lot of it in a way. I mean, just now actually preparing a talk for the Oxford Life Writing Centre about Constance Garnett, who was a translator of Russian 100 years before me, who translated some of the same things I translated. And that involves looking at her translations and looking at her decisions and then looking at my own decisions. And that's very, there's some, I'm really interested in the way we express things. Just
and that changed a lot in 100 years. Sort of your.
The sad thing is I don't really have access to her scribblings and her notes. What I want to see is where she crossed things out, where she was like, oh, I'll try this. No, that's not right. Oh, I'll try this. But instead, I only have the final result, and the final result could be edited or looked over by other people. It's hard for me to know exactly what she was, what her process looked like, which is what I really want to know. But she was an extraordinary translator. I mean, no, she's and remember, most of her writing is more appropriately appropriate than mine. Her language is much closer to theirs in terms of, she was basically a contemporary of many of these writers, like Chekhov, and
Was it unusual for a woman to be doing that job then? Because obviously 100 years ago, it wasn't.
Yes, totally. I mean, she went to Cambridge. She was educated. She wasn't from a very wealthy family, but she was from I think she was a blue stocking. She was one of those women that, in fact, she worked at a library. She worked at the library of what is now the Queen Mary University in London. There was a library there called, I think it was called the People's Library, and it was one of the first libraries created for the illiterate, in fact, for the illiterate poor. And it welcomed everybody, and they would help to teach people to read, and it was a library that was open to everyone. And this was one of the first libraries of that sort. In fact, it may have been the first library of that sort. Because libraries otherwise were very elitist institutions that you had to have some kind of membership to. And she was very much a believer in, she had sort of, socialist tendencies, and she was really interested in lifting up the downtrodden.
So she sounds almost like you could write a book about her.
Well, yes, so I am sort of supposed to be writing a book about her.
Oh, yeah.
That's why I lapsed into it. I mean, I am supposed to be writing a book about her. When I say supposed to, I can't get to any of the archives. So I'm sort of thwarted for the moment. And her biggest archive is in America, and I'm not gonna get to America for the next year or so. So
everything's really, for the pandemic, has really sort of held you back. And because was your book always, was it due to come out in September? Because that's the other thing.
Yes.
So that didn't change, although you were out on the day of the 598 other books coming out, wasn't it? That was just,
oh my goodness,
yeah.
what was that? There was a whole to do about it, and booksellers were panicking and showing their boxes of books and their piles of books that were arriving, and book review editors were saying they didn't have any space for any, you know, they could only review the bare minimum, and it was a real palaver, actually. I mean, that was because I guess a lot of books had been delayed.
Yeah,
that was always my pub date, the 3rd of September. It had been my pub date for 18 months, actually.
Really,
long time.
Yeah, lots of books that I was reading sort of had been given to read, sort of got postponed from sort of March, April, May, June, and then got pushed back to September. So a lot of those books were coming out then. And
I
also,
wonder if it did them any good. I mean, I suppose the good thing is at least bookshops were open by September.
Yeah.
But I don't know on hindsight what the wisdom would have been on that, to let a book come out in April and hopefully people buy it on their e-readers. It's very difficult because everything seemed to be online, and this year everything is online. Look at us, we're online. I mean, everything's online. It's really peculiar.
I think sort of because we missed at the beginning to say that because of our sort of glitches that Natasha is actually in the French Alps, where she's been since lockdown. So so we are having a really international feel to our
absolutely.
And yeah, I mean, that would have not been possible in real life. You wouldn't have just been able to pop over to Exeter for
No, exactly. I mean, it's been amazing on that score. I've managed to keep in touch with people. Twitter has been, I mean, for all its faults, Twitter has been a real godsend for me in terms of keeping in touch with people that I really wouldn't have come across or seen, and books I wouldn't have heard about, and articles I wouldn't have read. I mean, social media has some tremendous advantages. It has some real tremendous benefits, doesn't it?
It does, definitely. And a lot of the author talks that I have done since lockdown, because I hadn't done Zoom before lockdown, have been because I've seen, well, like yours was because we saw each other online, and Natasha Pulley, I did an event with, and she was just sort of saying, I want to do an event, and we sort of chatted, and so it's been really good. Some people I've have interviewed before in real life, but yeah, it's been great for us, and it's been really interesting. And I think for libraries, because we were closed for several months, it's been a great way of reaching our public, and particularly in Libraries Week, because Libraries Week this year is all about reading, which they have a different theme every year, and it's about reading and the love of reading and sharing the love of reading. So this is perfect.
And are you finding that most people are taking books out online? Do you online e-reader books? Can you do that?
Yes. So all of us, I think we saw a huge increase, in the 100%. It's been really interesting, and I think hopefully those people will carry on reading them. Now that, but I think people still do love coming to the libraries.
100%.
So many people.
I mean, what a place! I mean, it's a place for community. It's a place. I mean, being a library is like social media. It's just the real world of social media.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
I just think it's amazing. Karen, you've got to do some kind of Exeter festival or Devon festival when this is over and people can get together. You would just make such an amazing host of a festival.
Thank you so much, and thank you so much for coming all this way virtually.
Exactly, but thank you, because you've read my book and you've really read it with care, and that is extremely humbling, I think, is the word. In fact, it just makes me feel like, oh wow.
I think anybody, so you can see the book here. You can order it. I hope that we've got some. I haven't checked actually to see if we've got any in the library, so I'm hoping we have got some in the library, and if not, I'll be talking to the stock managers about ordering some. We may have them on our ebooks as well. But yeah, so thank you so much for coming, and I wish you all the best success. And yeah, if you are ever around in the Exeter area in real life,
Absolutely.
I'll be in touch.
I will come and find you, Karen. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay.